Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and get started and want to say thank you for attending today's webinar about the 2021 solid waste rate study and Chapter 28 updates. My name is Brenda Clark from the City of Tempe's Neighborhood Services Division, and I'll be helping out with hosting. First, a few quick notes. This meeting is being recorded and will be available within 2 business days at tempe.gov/utility rate study. Public comments and answers will be transcribed for our public input summary that will also be shared online. We ask all attendees please remain muted until the Q&A portion. Feel free to key any questions in the chat box at any time. Pueden hacer preguntas en español también. Favor de mandar preguntas por el chat. Towards the end of the meeting, we'll invite you to complete the short rate study survey and Chapter 28 survey if you haven't already. The survey will be open through September 12th, 2021. Now I'd like to go ahead and move over to the main event. Today's presenter is the City of Tempe Municipal Utilities Director, Terry Picars. Terry will speak for about 20 minutes and then we'll open up to Q&A and introduce subject matter expert in just a bit. So over to you, Terry.
Thanks, Brenda. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today and participating in this public meeting to discuss the recommendations of the 2021 solid waste rate study and revisions to Tempe City Code Chapter 28. Again, I'm Terry Picars, Municipal Utilities Director for the City of Tempe. And in addition to Brenda and me on the meeting today are other members of the rate study team, including Steve White, Cassandra Mack, Parish Spies, and Shannon Reed from the city, and Kyle Stevens from Stantec, our financial consulting firm, assisting staff with this year's rate study. The purpose of the public meeting is to talk to you about the process the solid waste utility undertook to execute the 2021 solid waste rate study and final results and recommendations from the study, and to discuss revisions to Tempe City Code Chapter 28, which were in part driven by feedback received during the first phase of public outreach pertaining to the study. Most importantly, we're here seeking your input as we finalize the study. Your input is very important to us, and the team is here to answer any questions you may have and provide any clarifying information. As Brenda mentioned, please use the chat or hand raising feature to either submit your questions and feedback during the presentation or to ask your questions afterward. We will answer as many questions as we can following the presentation. And again, we're also recording this public meeting so others who couldn't be here today can view it later and provide their input comments as well. So with that, let's get started. The 2021 solid waste rate study aligns with and supports these City Council strategic priorities and performance measures. In addition, staff also conducted the study in accordance with guidance received from the City Council at the April 8th, 2021 City Council work study session, and in consideration of community input gathered during an initial public comment period from April 8th, 2021 to May 8th, 2021. A robust solid waste program provides the community with a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment that promotes economic development and improves the quality of life for its citizens. Funding for the solid waste utility is structured within a self-supporting business-like enterprise fund. This means that services are funded by the rates, fees, and charges paid by customers who use those services, not by tax dollars. The periodic review of rates, fees, and charges is an important component of a well-managed and operated utility. The purpose of a rate study is to evaluate the cost of providing services, determine the revenue requirements necessary to maintain the financial health of the utility, and recommend adjustments to rates, fees, and charges where appropriate to ensure that revenue collected is sufficient and that rates, fees, and charges align with the organization's strategic and operational goals. As utility costs throughout the country continue to rise, Tempe Solid Waste Utility is committed to managing costs and staying efficient while upholding the city's commitment to a sustainable future. Every other year, the city retains the services of a third-party financial consultant to assist staff in conducting a comprehensive study of the cost to provide solid waste services to the Tempe community. As mentioned, this year, Tempe's Municipal Utilities Department contracted with Stantec Consulting. There are several components to a comprehensive solid waste rate study, starting with the utility's revenue requirements. The utility's revenue requirements represent the total amount of money a utility must collect from customers to pay all costs of providing the service. This amount was determined by identifying all current and estimated future operations and maintenance and capital costs over a 10-year period. This process ensures that the utility will have enough revenue to fund services and meet its reserve fund balance policy. Once revenue requirements are determined, The next step in the process is proportional cost allocation. The study was developed utilizing industry standard practices in the United States. Following the standard, costs were allocated proportionally to each customer class based on the true cost to provide solid waste services to that class. Once the utility's revenue requirements have been determined and costs have been allocated proportionally by customer, the next step in the process is rate design. Rate design is the development of the most appropriate rate structure to satisfy an organization's strategic and operational goals. Objectives can range from promoting environmental stewardship and sustainability to maintaining customer affordability concerns, to minimizing customer affordability concerns, to promoting economic development. Rate design also includes an analysis of the impact of proposed rate adjustments or rate structure changes on utility customers. This analysis includes seeking a feedback from city leadership, city council, and the community, and making adjustments where appropriate. The ultimate success of any rate study is largely dependent on communication. Communication throughout this process is key to ensuring utility customer involvement and understanding of the rate study process and data, the potential need for adjustments, national trends, and council priorities. Active stakeholder participation is an effective way of involving the community served and the respective customer classes, receiving input and ensuring transparency, and is vital to a comprehensive rate study process. Working with our partners in neighborhood services, communication and media relations, and strategic management and diversity, staff developed a two-phase multi-tiered plan to involve the public, which incorporated the equity and inclusion objectives of the organization. We conducted the first phase of community engagement at the beginning of the rate study process with the objective of collecting input to consider during the study. An example of this is several comments indicated that current service levels for alley maintenance and uncontained or bulk garbage and green organics collection is not meeting customer expectations. This input led to further financial and operational analysis and the inclusion of recommended additional resources in the study. And these increases were incorporated into the final recommended rates. In part resulting from the first phase of outreach, staff also reviewed and revised Chapter 28 of Tempe City Code pertaining to solid waste to address some of the concerns mentioned. All the feedback received during phase one is on the rate study website for review. With the study nearing completion, we are now in phase two of outreach with the objective of seeking community input on the study recommendations to communicate potential impacts of proposed rate adjustments and to seek feedback on the proposed revisions to Chapter 28 of the City Code. Like phase one, staff will compile and provide all feedback received to Mayor and Council before the rate study recommendations are considered for adoption. The study identified that the gross revenue requirement to operate and maintain the utility for fiscal year 2021-2022 is $20.8 million. After subtracting miscellaneous offsets such as the sale of assets and interest earned on investments, the net revenue requirement for the utility is $19.7 million. Current rate revenue generates $19.4 million, meaning that an additional $300,000 is needed beginning in January 2022 to meet the revenue requirements of the utility. To achieve this revenue, an overall 3% revenue adjustment is required. A levelized rate increase of 3% per year over the next several years will maintain the minimum fund balance policy, which is the amount equal to 15% of annual operating revenue. Next year, while staff will not conduct a full cost of service analysis, the utility will complete a financial model update of the solid waste fund to determine if revenue adjustments are necessary. If necessary, staff will return to City Council in the form of a request for council action to seek approval of the inflationary solid waste rate increase. The rate increase would apply to each solid waste service provided by the utility. The latter years of the financial model and cost projections are more ambiguous and will be analyzed and refined during future rate studies to ensure that the utility is meeting fiscal year revenue requirements and fund balance policy. While the utility requires a 3% revenue increase overall, rate adjustments to specific classifications or service charges may be higher or lower depending on current revenue versus the actual cost to provide service. Approximately 92% of residential solid waste customers receive the 96-gallon garbage and 96-gallon recycling service. This includes customers who share a 300-gallon garbage container deployed in an alley. 300-gallon garbage containers are shared by 3 customers, providing the equivalent of 96 gallons of disposal capacity per customer. This large group of customers will see a 75-cent increase on their monthly solid waste services bill. Collection and disposal costs were more precisely allocated in this year's financial model. The study determined that costs associated with collection were higher than previously modeled, and costs associated with disposal were lower. That is, the cost to collect garbage containers is the same, while the cost to dispose of the contents is different due to volumes and weights. Once these changes were incorporated into the financial model to more accurately align costs with the actual cost of providing service, one result was less difference between volume-based rates. Additionally, the cost allocation for green organics processing, alley maintenance, and uncontained garbage collection and disposal, while previously absorbed into the collection or disposal cost pool, were separated out and are now applied on a per container basis. As a result, while still less expensive than the 96-gallon or shared 300-gallon rate, customers being serviced with a 48-gallon or 65-gallon garbage container will see a greater increase in their monthly solid waste bill. This is another example of more accurate proportional cost allocation. The study also recommends a new monthly rate for an additional 96-gallon recycling container. Tempe's historical practice was to provide additional recycling containers at no additional cost. Changes to the national and worldwide recycling market and the resulting limited revenue from the sale of recycled materials necessitates that the utility recognize and account for the true cost of the service to collect and process recycled material. Residential customers with additional containers will be notified of this change. The study analyzed and determined the amount each rate component contributes to the new recommended monthly charge to provide residential solid waste customers a clear understanding of the costs that make up their monthly solid waste bill. This image shows the contribution of each respective rate component for the 96-gallon or shared 300-gallon container service. As you can see, garbage collection and disposal and recycling collection and processing account for almost 70% of the overall rate, while uncontained garbage collection and disposal, green organics processing, and the alley maintenance program making up the remaining 30%. The City of Tempe provides residents and commercial solid waste customers with several resources and programs to reduce the amount of material landfilled. These resources and programs include educational materials to assist customers with source reduction, zero waste day events to promote the reuse and repurposing of materials not accepted in the commingled recycling container, and collection and processing of green organics and inert material into compost and millings for reuse at our parks and for alley maintenance, as well as commingled container recycling. These resources and programs contribute to achieving the City Council adopted 25% citywide solid waste landfill diversion goal in performance measure 4.04. In fiscal year 2019-2020, the city achieved 23% landfill diversion. This graph compares Tempe's current and recommended residential monthly solid waste rate to other Valley municipalities. As represented in the dark blue bars, Tempe's is the second highest rate among the municipalities surveyed. Although Tempe's monthly charge ranks among the highest, residential solid waste customers receive additional services that residents of some other municipalities do not. These additional services reinforce our community's values and investment in a safe, clean, and sustainable environment. This table highlights the additional solid waste services provided to Tempe residential solid waste customers compared to municipalities listed in the previous monthly rate comparison graph. These are additional services beyond weekly garbage and commingled recycling collection. Respective cities are ordered from left to right based on their monthly residential solid waste rate from highest to lowest. As you can see in the Tempe column, the utility offers several services not offered by other municipalities, such as uncontained green organics collection, compost and inert processing, and alley maintenance funded and executed by the solid waste utility. The programs and services offered by the utility reflect the values of our community, customers, and the Tempe City Council. The study evaluated operating costs associated with compost yard operations versus revenue generated from gate rate fees and the sale of compost, and found that approximately $670,000 is unrecovered annually, which is subsidized by residential solid waste customers. Staff recommends ending pilot pricing and adopting a formal price structure that would allow for the wholesale and retail sale of compost based on the cost of service price and adjustable based on market conditions. Pricing would apply to internal customers such as community services and the Golf Fund, as well as to the general public. This will allow the utility to maximize cost recovery. If it is the will of the City Council, compost could be discounted to Tempe residential solid waste customers, with any difference between revenue generated and annual operating costs being paid to the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund from the general fund. The city will continue to evaluate opportunities to partner with other municipalities or private entities to provide alternative means of delivering green organics processing to the community. The utility provides solid waste services to commercial customers in the form of side load, front load, and roll-off containers. The service delivery model for commercial services differs from that of residential service, since the utility operates in competition with private commercial service providers. The implications of a competitive commercial service market must be recognized in the development of commercial rates. The utility must aim to achieve overall direct cost recovery while being cognizant of its market position. The study did not recommend adjusting rates for front load garbage service, but did recommend decreasing the current multiple container discount. Based on the financial consultant's analysis and industry knowledge, it was determined that discounts offered in the city's current rate structure are higher than what is normally observed. As such, it is recommended that discounts be reduced by 5%, which will bring them into closer alignment with industry standard practices. The utility also offers front load recycling service to commercial customers. Recycling curbside and front load containers are billed separately from garbage containers, and current rates are structured as a flat rate regardless of container size. The study recommends volume-based rates for front load container sizes that reflect the higher costs associated with larger containers. Chapter 28 of the Tempe City Code pertains to solid waste. Coinciding with the study, staff has reviewed and is proposing revisions to Chapter 28, which was last revised in 2010. The revisions clarify and reinforce property owners and occupants' responsibility to maintain alleys, administrative processes related to licensing of private entities providing solid waste services within Tempe, the department's name change, and new and updated definitions. These revisions in part are in response to feedback received from customers during phase 1 of the rate study outreach efforts. Some examples of the updates include clarifying alley maintenance responsibilities for all adjacent property owners and/or occupants or renters of the property, aligning enforcement language to ARS 9-499 that requires 30 days for a violation to be resolved before the city can abate the property, clarifying language for private hauler licensing process, and modernizing and adding terms and definitions to reflect the new department name and green organics and composting programs. As previously mentioned, with the study nearing conclusion, we are currently in the second month-long phase of public outreach. We will be seeking community input on the study recommendations, communicating potential impacts of proposed rate adjustments, and seeking feedback on the proposed revisions to Chapter 28 of the Tempe City Code. In October, City Council will be asked to consider adoption of proposed solid waste rate adjustments. If adopted by Council, the new rates will become effective in January 2022. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the purpose of this public meeting is to present the recommendations of the 2021 solid waste rate study and seek your input. Again, your input is very important to us, and I encourage everyone to complete the public comment survey, open until September 12th and available at tempe.gov/forum. More information on the public comment survey and the rate study in general is available on our webpage, tempe.gov/utility rate study. With that, we'll take some questions, comments, or feedback. Please use the hand raising feature or the chat to submit questions and feedback, and we'll address as many questions and comments as we can during the remaining time. And finally, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon, for your participation in this important process and your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor. If there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away if there's anything you'd like to know. Okay, hearing none, I just want to say thank you again for participating in today's meeting, and encourage you to view and do the survey online. Actually, we have one question. Let me get unmuted here, just a moment.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead with your question, Janelyn.
I have a question. In my neighborhood, single resident, intentionally the homes, single family, and of course, the neighborhood has evolved. We've had more homes that have turned into rentals, college rentals, or other types of renting situations with many folks living in the homes. How does that impact, or was that taken into consideration for the waste study when you talk about 3 customers per 300-gallon trash? And I'll just go ahead and send it out to the airwaves and see what kind of response I get. Thank you for this, and thank you for taking my question.
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, we've actually have received that input on a couple occasions. So I'll just explain the process a little bit in terms of the deployment of the 300-gallon shared containers. The solid waste section of the division, they perform kind of routine and regular audits to make sure that we have a proper distribution of those 300-gallon containers per residential customer, and that we don't have things that are sort of moving around or not where we need them to be, to make sure we're servicing everyone properly. The other part of that, which is, you didn't exactly ask, but I think what you're implying is that, we do see a bit of an overuse of containers at times. So what we do is we also look at reports of, folks who will report that, for example, the container was emptied on a Tuesday and it was full on a Wednesday, so they weren't able to use that container for their own, disposal purposes. So we'll also monitor that from an inspection standpoint. And sometimes there are some things that need to be done from a communication or education standpoint for renters. And if not the renters, the property owners, to make sure they understand what the requirements are and how this system works. Sometimes it can go as far as enforcement. We've seen things where we've got situations that are overflow conditions or perhaps illegal dumping, something of that nature, where we have to, again, that was a lot of the purpose behind the code review of Code Chapter 28, and also some revisions, so that we have some ability to enforce if necessary, or take action in a timely manner, so that these conditions don't occur or exist for an extended period, and then other customers who are not necessarily responsible for what's happening are being impacted. So I hope I answered your question sufficiently, and thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Terry. Janelyn, did that cover the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, like I said, if we have any other questions, feel free to reach out. All the information on the rate study is at tempe.gov/utility rate study. The survey will be open online through September the 12th, and we'd really encourage you to do that. So thank you for your participation, and this concludes the meeting.